We'll hold our hands up. So often, cycling media can be full of coverage from big brands showcasing their big glossy products. However, what about the kit right down at the other end that's so easy and cheap to buy off Amazon? How bad or how good really is it? We've loaded up the virtual basket and checked out on a whole bunch of accessories to see how they stack up. Now, I've linked them all down in the description box below if any of them do take your interest. First though, let's get into our first product. First up then, we've got the Techalogic CF1 front cycling camera and light. Now, you've got to think of this more as a dash cam rather than a GoPro rival. Now, as you can see, it does look quite basic and boxy, and the front light itself isn't actually that bright. It is 400 lumens, but compared to other 400 lumens, it doesn't really throw out that same kind of light. I will say though, it's going to be perfectly fine to use in well-lit areas. I think if you do go off the beaten track or just areas that are unlit, that's when you're going to need a dedicated front light. There isn't much user feedback. We've simply got 3 buttons on the side here, one to turn it on, one to turn the light on, and then one to take a still image. And then you've got a single LED here up front in lieu of having a screen. But none of that really matters because as a dash cam, it does a brilliant job. The images are of a fairly high quality, so if you do have an unfortunate incident or have a close shave with wildlife, you are going to be able to capture that in high definition. On to the battery life, and this is going to last 4 hours if you're filming and you have the front light on. Now that will push out to 7 hours if you're simply filming, so not too bad. Now finally, I want to come on to its rivals, and that would be in the form of the Cyclic Fly 12. Now that is rammed full of features, and you do pay a price for that, about 3 times as much as this. So if you are just after the simple camera and lights combo, I think this is a must-have. All right, next up, we've got the well-known Ozero cycling gloves. These ones, the only good thing about them is the price. Now in pounds, they come in at $14.99. Benefits, that's about it. It's then kind of downhill from there because the fit of them really isn't very good. You've got these really bulky fingers and you just lose all dexterity in them, and the fitting of them as well isn't that good. As soon as you start to close up your palm as if you were going to be holding onto a handlebar, you end up with this big ripple in the middle. So it's not going to be great for control if you want to hold onto the bars without your hands moving around inside your gloves. Onto the waterproofness, and although water will bead up on the surface at first, they do very quickly get saturated, and really they offer no protection. For gloves that are this bulky as well, you'd expect them to be warmer. They're really not that warm. I think if you do need to buy a set of gloves, I would look around, see what's in the sales, because you can find gloves from reputable brands 50% off a lot of the time, and you know, you can get something a lot better for not too much more money. So if you do enjoy being able to feel your fingers, I would spend a little bit more and get some better gloves. Next up then, we've got the Rockbros Photochromic sunglasses. Now, I'm actually a really big fan of these. I think partly down to that actually fairly modern looking design, where you've got that half frameless look. It's, yeah, no, it looks really good. And you've got really wide coverage as well. So I would say these don't really have the photochromic range of some of their more expensive counterparts at either end. So that's something you're going to want to look out for. However, that being said, you can still use these in low light conditions. I would say 45 minutes around dawn up until about the same time after sunset, you're going to be able to use these. They're not going to work for night riding, so if that's something you do want to do, then I would say get something with a purely clear lens. They weren't overwhelmed by the UK full sunlight, however, it was pretty close. So if you have sensitive eyes or you live in an area with brighter sun, then you're going to want to find something with a heavier tint. On to how these things change, and they aren't really the fastest things in the world. I found that they worked really well when they were only having to deal with kind of the differing in the thickness of the clouds. However, as soon as you're flying in and out of woodland, that's when they really struggle to keep up. So if you do that often, you might want to spend more money to get something that's a bit more suitable. So if you do need something a bit more performance orientated, the Tifosi rails are a really good option, and they come in at $79.95 in dollars. You can still spend more money after that amongst other brands, but the benefits do become marginal. Overall, I really like these. I think for £30.49 here in the UK, they're a great option. They look great, they do still work really well, and for the majority of people, I think they're going to be a really good option. So check these out because, yeah, they get a big thumbs up from me. These are the Air Conduction open ear headphones. Now, these are bone conduction headphones, so you get the massive benefit of not having to put anything inside your ear, and instead it travels down the bone itself, so you can still hear all the traffic that's around you. Also, for indoor sweaty sessions, you're not going to be filling these things up with sweat, so you're not going to really be putting them at any risk of water damage. These are incredibly cheap as well compared to other ones that are on the market. The Shox Open Run headphones come in at about £130, and these are about £100 cheaper than that, so significantly cheaper. Now, the Open Runs from Shox are much better at handling bass, and predictably, these ones can be quite tinny. Charging on these ones is done through a micro USB just on the side here. However, on the Shox Open Run, they use their own proprietary magnetic clip-on cable, so it's a bit more sophisticated. However, it still does the same thing. I think if you're after a more complete experience, then the Shox are going to provide that, but that does obviously come at a significant price increase. With these coming in at around that £30 mark, I think these are a bit of a no-brainer if you kind of want to dip your toe into the bone conduction headphone market, especially when it's something that can take a bit of a beating. Next up, we've got a little bit of bike packing tech in the form of the Lixada bar bag. Now, this is a pretty good one, and there's a lot of good stuff to say. I've always been and always will be a big fan of the holster and dry bag design. Now, they've taken it one step further by including this Velcro strap, which allows you to kind of mount it to the holster whilst you're then doing the clips up and getting your tension on the bag and the bike. The dry bag itself is made of a really sturdy material, and it is waterproof, so you can fit quite a lot in there as well. I'm a big fan of that dry bag, and it is pretty solid when it's mounted to the bike. I wouldn't take it on anything too technical, but anything up to gravel, you'll be absolutely fine with. There are a few niggles which I'll bring up. First off, being that this isn't a dual entry dry bag. You can only access it from one way, so it does mean it's a bit of a faff trying to fish things right at the very bottom. Another niggle I've noticed is that there's no webbing on the holster itself. It would have been nice if there was something so you could kind of stash a waterproof or some snacks away really easily. And lastly, I would say that the straps themselves can be a little tricky to get a good amount of tension with. They do take a little bit of time to get that sorted, but otherwise it's a really good option. When you start to look at other competitors on the market, for example, Restrap with their bar bag, you're going to be paying £100 for one of those, whereas this is 5 times cheaper. So I think if you're wanting to dabble in bike packing, maybe you just want to dip your toe in, give it a try, or you just don't do it that often, I think this is the perfect option. But if you do need something that's a lot more capable and addresses all of the issues I've just mentioned, that's when you'd then look towards a Restrap bag. But this, I really like it. I think it's really good. So I've got here the Rhinowalk Giant Saddlebag, and there is a lot of good things to say about this. First one being, and this is my favourite part, this internal lining. It's bright yellow and it makes it super easy to find things inside the bag. Next up, you've got some webbing here, which makes it really easy to stash a waterproof on the outside. You've also got a light hook here, so you can mount lights to the outside, which makes it super easy. You've also got a really sturdy mounting system. So you've got 2 Velcro straps here and the clips as well. So mounting this, it does stay pretty rock solid on most terrains. Obviously that will vary depending on how much weight is in there. Obviously the heavier, the more it's going to move about. Onto the downsides, and the seams aren't taped, so if you do need to keep the contents dry, you will have to put those into a dedicated dry bag. As before with that bar bag though, if you're looking to dip your toe into the bike packing world, this is going to be a perfect match at a pretty small cost. On to one of the more strangely named cycling computers out there. This is the Coospo cycling computer. Now this one here is very straightforward and it is pretty cheap. It's got a clear display and you're going to be able to see a whole variety of metrics on here. It does have Bluetooth and ANT+, so you can connect it to all your usual sensors, and it syncs seamlessly to the Coospo app, which can then push your rides to Strava, which is very handy. However, there's no mapping, not even a breadcrumb trail, and it kind of feels like using your phone would be a much better experience. Apps like Cycle Meter will provide you with all the same metrics and also give you a route to follow. However, in that scenario, you're probably going to need a power bank for those longer days in the saddle. But even when you factor in the cost of the app, the phone mount, the power bank, and a bag to carry the power bank in, you're going to be somewhere in and around what a computer like this would cost you, but with a much more enriched experience. Of course, you might prefer the aesthetic of a small GPS unit like this, and obviously if the weather goes south, you're not going to be worrying about this as much as you will be with your phone. That being said, I am going to give this one a thumbs down. I think you can spend your money far better either with a phone setup or with one of the more well-known brands and get a GPS computer which does perform better than this. Next up, from Manchester-based brand VeloChampion, we have their road pump. Now, this one's a reasonable size and you can mount it to the frame using that frame mount there. It passes a reasonable amount of air per stroke, which is nice. However, it will only inflate on the push in rather than the pull out as well. And that is a design feature that you might only really see on some higher end models. For pumps that offer a similar functionality, there are others out there which are a lot more streamlined, but are costing 2 times, if not 3 times the amount. Depending on your situation, spending an extra £10 or £15 might be a bit of a no-brainer, especially if it means that the pump's going to last you a whole lot longer and is potentially even lighter and more streamlined. Not to be unduly harsh, but the ReHook is a prime example of treating the symptom and not the cause. Fundamentally, your chain shouldn't be falling enough to warrant buying a tool to simply put it back on. Although it does have an incredibly handy elasticated strap so you can mount it to the frame, and it only weighs 20 grams. If this is happening to you frustratingly often, what you really need to do is check your chain wear, your gear indexing, and your chainring wear. Doing that is going to get to the cause of the problem and not try and mitigate one of the symptoms of it. But in terms of its actual use, it is very good at working. It sits within those wider links of the chain, and then you can then loop it back onto the chainring, and arguably is a much nicer thing to use than a leaf or a twig. Of course, you could use a disposable glove because arguably it's lighter, cheaper, and you can pack it into your saddlebag, but it is nicer to cut down on those single-use plastics. Either way, I think this is going to be one of the Amazon products to avoid. It's a bit of a thumbs down for me. So there we have it. I think there was definitely more good products than there were bad ones, and they definitely surprised me. I think some of my favorites were the Bone Conduction headphones and the Photochromic sunglasses. What have you found online, even if it's not on Amazon? Products that you found have really punched above their weight and delivered incredible value. Do let me know down in the comments, because we might do another one of these videos looking to see what you guys have found. If you enjoyed the video, drop it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and I'll see you again very soon.